Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take the densest source material, the complex research, the weighty articles, the ancient texts, and we pull out the pure, essential knowledge that you need.
And our mission, as always, is for you, the learner, gaining that knowledge quickly, but, thoroughly.
And today, we are undertaking a really specialized deep dive,
We are. We're stepping back about 2,500 years.
right into one of the most vital moments in post-exilic history. Our focus is a single, just an astonishing vision. Zechariah chapter 4.
And this is not going to be a high-level, 30,000-foot view of Old Testament prophecy.
No, no. We are getting into the granular, the verse-by-verse mechanics of a visual assurance that, it really changed everything for a community that was just desperate.
We're focusing strictly on the text itself, the historical context around it, and the profound prophetic symbolism that's packed into this one chapter.
To really get the power of this vision, you have to appreciate just the crushing historical moment they were in.
Yeah. You absolutely do. We're diving into the world of the returned exiles. So these are the descendants of the people who were dragged off to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar decades and decades earlier.
And they were finally allowed to come back to Jerusalem. But, what they found was ruin. It wasn't glory.
Not at all. They were a small, struggling, really impoverished group of people.
And their mandate was divine, right? Rebuild the temple of the Lord. Their leader was Zerubbabel, the governor, a descendant of King David.
But they hit a wall. They laid the foundation, and then they ran right into this wall of foreign and local opposition.
And he just stopped.
They just stopped. For 16 long, discouraging years, the project just sat there.
What were the biggest obstacles? What exactly was that wall?
Well, the obstacles were immense. You had political malice from local authorities. You had the Samaritans constantly interfering.
It's just a profound lack of resources, I imagine. Money, materials.
Everything. But, the greatest obstacle wasn't even external. It was internal. It was spiritual exhaustion, apathy.
And that paralyzing comparison, right? Looking at their meager efforts and comparing it to the legendary grandeur of Solomon's temple that had been destroyed.
Exactly. And the stakes here are they're astronomical. If they fail to rebuild the temple, which was the spiritual and national heart of the people, their very identity as a covenant nation was at risk.
So this is an existential crisis.
It is, and that is why chapter 4 is so crucial. It contains what's called the fifth vision. It's this stunning visual promise, and it's centered on a miraculous, self-sustaining candlestick.
And it delivers a direct, personal, and just an absolute guarantee to Zerubbabel.
A guarantee that says, despite all appearances, you will finish what you started.
It's the ultimate divine intervention into that corporate feeling of, we can't do this. It's telling them the resources you need for a divine task are themselves inexhaustible and divine.
Precisely. It is the definitive assurance that your power source is guaranteed.
Okay, let's unpack this vision, starting right at the beginning with the very human state of the prophet Zechariah himself. So, verse 1. It begins with this really interesting observation about the process of revelation. It says, "And the angel that talked with me came again and waked me as a man that is wakened out of his sleep."
And that paints such a deeply human picture of the prophet, doesn't it?
It really does.
Zechariah had just received a whole series of these highly detailed, emotionally heavy visions. The 4 chariots, the measuring line, the cleansing of the high priest.
So this wasn't his first rodeo. He's been through the ringer already.
Exactly. And the sheer spiritual and cognitive load of processing divine prophecy, it often pushed the human recipient right to their limits.
So are we talking about him literally being asleep? Or is this more of a spiritual exhaustion, a kind of stupor?
It could be either or both. The text is a little ambiguous. He might have been physically asleep, but it's more likely suggesting he was just overwhelmed, spiritually overloaded, mentally exhausted from this intense divine interaction.
So he was, in a sense, metaphorically asleep on the job.
Right. And the angel's action here is critical. He waked me. It demonstrates that you need this renewed divine push, a divine impetus to even continue the mission.
The vision wasn't done, but Zechariah's human capacity was.
That's it. It's a subtle but really powerful reminder that even divine communication requires divine enabling for the human receiver to stay receptive. It's like the spiritual equivalent of hitting the reset button.
And so, once he's roused and alert, the angel immediately prompts him in verse 2. He kicks off the vision's core image. "What seest thou?"
And Zechariah says, "I have looked, and behold, a candlestick, all of gold, with a bowl upon the top of it, and his 7 lamps thereon, and 7 pipes to the 7 lamps which are upon the top thereof.
We have to linger on that description. It's not just a candlestick, it is hyper-specific.
It is. It's made all of gold, which instantly connects it in their minds to the purity, the value, the holiness of the traditional temple menorah.
But the components here, the specific parts, that's what tells the story.
Yes. The key features are these almost engineered elements. You see the central large bowl upon the top of it.
Which isn't just a container, right? It's a reservoir.
It is a reservoir. And then critically, the 7 pipes to the 7 lamps.
Okay, so this is where it gets interesting. This is the engineering of the vision.
Exactly. Think about a traditional temple menorah. It required constant human priestly activity. The priests had to measure the oil, prepare it, and refill those little oil cups every single day.
So it was totally dependent on human resources, human labor, a human schedule.
It was, but this candlestick, this visionary apparatus, is completely self-sustaining.
The large central bowl ensures there's an abundance of oil, and those 7 pipes guarantee a continuous, instantaneous delivery to every single lamp.
It bypasses the need for human intervention entirely.
So the message is immediate. This light, which symbolizes Israel's purpose, its mission in the world, it's not dependent on their limited human effort, or their finite earthly resources, or their unreliable human diligence.
Not at all. Its source of sustenance is constant, it's abundant, and it's divine. The point is, if the mission is God's, the fuel is guaranteed.
And standing right alongside this miraculous self-feeding machine, verse 3 introduces the second major element of the vision.
And 2 olive trees by it, one upon the right side of the bowl and the other upon the left side thereof.
So we have the mechanism for light, the menorah, and the mechanism for the fuel, the bowl and pipes, and now we get the actual source.
2 living, thriving olive trees that are flanking the entire setup.
Okay, so what is the immediate historical interpretation here? Why 2 living trees?
Well, based on the immediate needs of that moment, and looking at the visions that came right before this one, especially chapter 3, where Joshua the high priest is cleansed and restored, the 2 olive trees represent the dual leadership that was essential for the restoration.
Zerubbabel and Joshua.
Zerubbabel, the governor, the political leader, and Joshua the high priest, the spiritual leader.
So they are depicted as upholding God's work in Jerusalem. The olive tree itself is, it's an ancient symbol of fertility, peace, abundance. But here it's also about consecration. It's the source of that golden oil.
They are the twin pillars of authority that are needed to guide the nation after the exile. One is responsible for the temporal, the physical rebuilding of the structure.
And the other is responsible for the spiritual and moral rebuilding, the soul of the nation.
And the vision places them right there, right next to the source of the divine supply.
It's an incredible visual, isn't it? A unified mission, 2 very distinct roles, but both of them are drawing their effectiveness from the exact same divine source, and they're both focused on feeding that single light.
Okay, so now that we've established the components, let's dig into the profound symbolism here, starting with the candlestick itself.
In Jewish tradition, the golden menorah in the temple was, it was the preeminent symbol of Israel's role, wasn't it?
It absolutely was. It symbolized Israel's identity as the chosen covenant people. Their whole mission was to be God's light to the surrounding nations.
To be a witness of the one true God in a world that was steeped in polytheism and, darkness.
And the number 7 is so key. The 7 lamps symbolize completeness, perfection. They represent Israel's mission to be fully illuminated by the divine spirit, shining forth perfectly.
The implication being that a dimmer or an incomplete light would just fail its purpose.
Right, only a full, constantly replenished light can actually fulfill the covenant.
What's fascinating is how potent this vision was. It seems to have really transcended its immediate historical context and became, the source material for later prophecy.
It did. Our source material highlights its explicit connection to the book of Revelation, specifically chapters 1 and 11.
And this is where we get a really profound shift in understanding the people of God. So Zechariah sees a single candlestick, one object with 7 lamps.
Correct. Symbolizing the formal, centralized unity of the Old Testament people of God, focused physically on Jerusalem and the temple.
Now let's hold that image right next to the description in Revelation chapter 1. The Apostle John sees Christ walking among, 7 separate lampstands.
7 separate lampstands. In different cities all across Asia Minor, the contrast is just striking.
It really is.
The single menorah was fundamentally tied to one physical location, the literal temple in Jerusalem. It symbolized a centralized national identity.
But the 7 separate lampstands in Revelation show the light dispersed. It's no longer tethered to a single geographical spot or a single national structure,
And this shift represents the move from the light of the Old Covenant, which was all about national restoration as a singular location, to the light of the New Covenant.
which is about diverse local fellowships, the 7 churches, but they're all unified in their mission.
It's a oneness that is now conjoined with diversity, where Christ's presence and his correction are right there in the midst of each distinct congregation.
And while Revelation 1 focuses on Christ's oversight of these churches, the source material notes that the oil supply mechanism, that core idea of divinely fueled witnesses, it comes up again later.
It does in Revelation 11. It explicitly links back to the 2 olive trees providing the fuel for what it calls the 2 witnesses. This just shows the continuing theological importance of Zechariah's original vision of self-sustaining divine power.
Okay, so let's go back to the source of that fuel in Zechariah's vision, the golden oil. We need to go beyond just saying it's energy.
We do. The theologian Alexander Maclaren provides a really specific interpretation of what this oil symbolizes.
And what's his take?
Maclaren stresses that the oil is the standing emblem throughout this whole tradition for a divine spirit or a God-breathed influence. It is not just metaphorical energy, it is the very lifeblood of consecrated service.
So it's not just fuel, it's a process of preparation. It's anointing.
Exactly. Its precise purpose, as Maclaren notes, is to prepare and consecrate people, whether they were prophets, priests, kings, or even the skilled artisans and craftsmen, for their specific task.
He has a great phrase for it. He says it's about fitting them to shine.
A beautiful phrase. The oil enables the shining by purifying and empowering the vessel that holds the light.
And since this oil comes from a living, naturally yielding source, the olive trees, which are constantly replenishing that bowl, what does that emphasize about the nature of this power?
It emphasizes the origin. The growth of the olive, the yield of the oil, is depicted as entirely God's doing. It's an organic miracle.
So the power for service, for rebuilding the temple, for spiritual renewal, for overcoming opposition, it has to be entirely divine. It's not natural.
That's the crucial insight. So when the discouraged exiles looked at their empty treasuries and their small labor force, this vision was telling them, your human limitation is completely irrelevant.
Because the power source is unlimited, it's self-sustaining, and it's guaranteed by God himself. That abundance of oil, that guarantee of divine power, it sets the stage for the most famous and maybe the most crucial prophetic message in this entire chapter.
A message delivered directly to Zerubbabel.
We really need to pause on this critical assurance. I mean, this is the mission statement for the whole project.
Verse 6 is, and rightly so, celebrated. After the angel addresses the symbolism, he delivers this proclamation. This is the word of the Lord unto Zerubbabel, saying, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts.
And that is the heart of the message, isn't it? Laid bare for a people who felt utterly powerless.
Utterly. They lacked might, which here means military strength, large armies, political aggression, and they lacked power, meaning the resources, the infrastructure, the vast financial and material capital needed for a massive construction project.
They had neither.
They had neither. And the analysis here is unflinching. The temple will not be finished because Zerubbabel manages to pull off some diplomatic coup in Persia, or because the Samaritans are finally defeated in a battle.
Or because some wealthy donor suddenly appears with a blank check.
None of that. It will be completed purely and solely through the divine enabling power, the Spirit, which is symbolized by that endless golden oil.
Okay, but let me inject a point of historical complexity here. For you, the learner, you have to understand this tension. The Samaritans were actively using force and political maneuvering to stop the construction. They were literally fighting them.
They were.
So, wasn't military might exactly what Zerubbabel needed to just secure the worksite?
Yeah.
How do the exiles reconcile, not by might, with the very real political and military reality they were facing every single day?
That is a critical question. And the prophecy doesn't promise the absence of struggle. It promises the inefficacy of human effort in place of divine effort.
Ah, okay. That's a key distinction.
The point is that the ultimate success or failure rests on God's active, spirit-driven intervention, not on the scale of human political maneuvering. God will move the necessary mountains either by changing the hearts of kings, like he did with Darius, or by simply neutralizing the opposition.
So the emphasis is on divine leverage over human agency.
Exactly. Success is guaranteed because the means are spiritual, and this is immediately illustrated in verse 7, where the impossible challenges are addressed metaphorically.
Who art thou, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel thou shalt become a plain.
I mean, what a metaphor. The great mountain represents any obstacle opposing God's work, no matter how immense or insurmountable it appears to human eyes.
And historically, we're talking about the spiritual resistance of Satan, the political labyrinth of the Persian Empire, and the immediate, practical, physical opposition from their enemies. All of it.
All of it rolled into one image. And the prophet isn't just comforting them, he is directly addressing the obstacle, that insurmountable feeling, and declaring its certain guaranteed defeat.
He's talking to the impossibility of the situation itself.
He is. And we see this mirrored elsewhere in prophecy. You can connect this assurance to Isaiah 40, verse 4, which speaks of preparing the way for the Lord. Every valley shall be exalted, and every mountain and hill shall be made low.
This isn't just a promise of, making things a little easier. It's a prophecy of total victorious transformation.
It's about flattening the high obstacles to create a smooth path for God's purposes. The mountain's fate is sealed the moment Zerubbabel stands before it, backed by the Spirit.
And verse 7 continues with this absolute assurance of completion. It says, Zerubbabel will finish the work, bringing forth the headstone.
The headstone, or the capstone, it's the crowning element, the final stone that completes the entire structure. The moment it's put into place, all the opposition, the delay, the despair, it all vanishes.
And the crowd's response is mandated. It's crucial. They are commanded to shout, grace, grace unto it.
Our sources emphasize this is so much more than just cheering.
Right. It's a theological declaration.
It is. It signifies divine favor. It's an acknowledgement of God's provision, and it's an explicit recognition that the completion was accomplished purely by God's grace, not by the meager resources of the exiles. The finished temple is a monument to divine favor alone.
And that certainty is then ratified in the next verses, 8 and 9. It removes any doubt about where this guarantee is coming from.
Moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, The hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hands shall also finish it.
That is about as absolute and non-negotiable a guarantee as you can get. The one who started the work is divinely commissioned and guaranteed to finish it.
And that guarantee has a dual purpose. Of course, it provides comfort to Zerubbabel, but it also serves as the authentication for Zechariah's entire prophetic ministry.
The verse ends, Thou shalt know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me unto you.
So the completion of the visible material temple will serve as the undeniable proof of the reliability of God's invisible promise.
This sets us up perfectly for verses 10, which speaks directly to the psychological state of the exiles. For who hath despised the day of small things?
That phrase is just eternal, isn't it? It speaks directly to every generation that has ever faced a daunting task with what feels like minimal resources.
Totally. The exiles were naturally comparing their small, humble foundation, built from salvaged materials and meager funds, to the legendary opulence of Solomon's temple. They were embarrassed by the scale of their effort.
If Zerubbabel were trying to fund this on a modern crowdfunding platform, people would have looked at that initial foundation after 16 years of delay and said, who authorized this disaster? This project is failing.
That's a great way to put it. The day of small things is the universal struggle of the startup, the small community, the minimal effort that feels so insignificant against these monumental odds.
And God issues a sharp warning here. Do not despise the small beginnings. The work might be humble, but because it is His work, the very act of beginning, however small, brings rejoicing in the divine realm.
The requirement isn't overwhelming scale. It's just faithfulness to start.
That's it. And the verse continues. For they shall rejoice and shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel.
Okay, let's talk about this plummet. The interpretation isn't entirely straightforward, is it?
It's not. The traditional interpretation of the plummet, or the plumb line, is that it's a construction tool used to ensure vertical alignment. So it signifies that the work is underway with precision and it's moving toward completion.
But the source material suggests an interesting alternative.
It does. It suggests the plummet may symbolize the final capstone itself, or maybe a symbolic measure that's held by the leader.
So regardless of whether it's the tool or the stone, the key idea is that the means of completion are now visible in Zerubbabel's hand.
Yes, it is the sign that the project, however humbly it began, has entered its final, inevitable stage, all assured by the Spirit.
And now, verse 10 ends with one of the most powerful concepts in the whole chapter, linking that small physical act of completion, seeing the plummet with universal divine oversight.
It's a staggering shift in perspective. The verse connects the sighting of the plummet with those seven. They are the eyes of the Lord, which run to and fro through the whole earth.
We're moving from a small stone in Jerusalem to global divine omniscience. The seven connects directly back to the seven lamps.
And thus to the fullness of the Spirit of God. This image symbolizes God's comprehensive, constant, and active surveillance, his perfect providence over the entire world.
This is God providing the ultimate 247 monitoring of their project, but not to catch them making mistakes.
No, not at all. It's to guarantee that no enemy maneuver, no political threat, and no human apathy goes unnoticed or unopposed.
It's assurance through omniscience.
It is. If the Lord is watching the entire earth, then nothing, no mountain of opposition, no delay from a governor, no local interference is hidden from him, and absolutely nothing can ultimately thwart his plan for this small temple in Jerusalem.
Our sources beautifully emphasize this by cross-referencing 2 Chronicles 16:9.
Which says, "The eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong in behalf of those whose heart is perfect toward him."
So that links God's concept monitoring not just to the restoration project itself, but to the character of the people involved.
Exactly. It guarantees divine support for those who are committed to his purpose, regardless of the odds. So the message isn't just that the work will finish. It's that the workers themselves are under constant, powerful protection, provided they maintain a sincere heart toward God. Okay, the vision is now nearly complete. But the prophet, he still needs the key to the allegory of the oil source.
Right. Zechariah, like us, has questions about the identity of the 2 figures that make this whole system work.
And he is thorough in his quest for understanding. He asks the angel immediately after seeing the candlestick, back in verses 4 and 5, "What are these, my Lord?"
And the angel's response is interesting. Knowest thou not what these be? It's a rhetorical question, isn't it? It's guiding him toward the revelation by highlighting just how important it is.
So he gets that central promise in verse 6, but he is still fixated on the supply chain. He's still thinking about the logistics of this thing.
He is. He asks again, even more specifically in verses 11 through 13. He really homes in on the mechanism. What be these 2 olive branches, which through the 2 golden pipes empty the golden oil out of themselves? He's recognized the miraculous nature of the supply. These olive branches aren't just decorative. They are actively, instantaneously generating and delivering this golden oil directly through these golden conduits to the central bowl.
And he needs to know the identity of these vital conduits, these sources of life.
It's the difference between asking about the structure and asking about the people who hold the power.
Precisely. And after all that persistence, the angel finally gives him the identity in verse 14.
These are the 2 anointed ones.
Which, if you translate it literally from the Hebrew, means the sons of oil.
Sons of oil. I mean, that term immediately evokes consecration, being set apart for service. Their very existence is defined by their proximity to and their transmission of the divine anointing.
Yes, their identity is rooted in their function and their position. They are the channels of the oil, the Spirit, and their role is positional. They stand by the Lord of the whole earth.
Which is a statement of divine appointment. It's saying that their authority doesn't come from human election or political maneuvering. It comes from the Almighty himself.
So the big question, who are these 2 anointed ones in the immediate historical context of the restoration?
Our source material is very clear on the primary interpretation based on the narrative flow of the book of Zechariah.
The primary view identifies them as the 2 names that are essential to the mission: Joshua the high priest and Zerubbabel the governor.
These 2 embody the necessary streams of leadership for any successful restoration or renewal.
You have Joshua, who represents the religious and spiritual authority, the purified priesthood, access to God.
And you have Zerubbabel, who represents the kingly and secular authority. He's from the royal lineage of David, and he has the power to execute the physical construction.
For the restoration of the covenant people to succeed, both of these authorities, priest and king, spiritual guidance and temporal execution, they had to work in perfect, harmonious alignment.
And they had to be fed by the same single, continuous spirit, the oil. The light only shines if both of those streams are flowing.
Right. If the vision were only about Zerubbabel finishing the structure, the priest might not be necessary. If it were only about spiritual renewal, maybe the governor would be secondary.
But since the mission is both the physical temple and the spiritual renewal of the people, both streams of anointing have to be present.
Now, the sources do mention a secondary view, though it relies a bit less on the immediate context.
How's that one?
Some scholars suggest the 2 anointed ones could represent the prophets Zechariah and Haggai, who are the instruments God used to stir the people out of their apathy and force them back to work after that 16-year delay.
So if the 2 trees are the prophets, the symbolism shifts a little. It would emphasize the ongoing need for continuous God-breathed influence prophecy to keep the light of Israel's mission constantly burning.
But even under that interpretation, the core message holds. The power is not intrinsic to the men themselves. It flows through them.
Right. The synthesis for you, the learner, is this. Israel's divine mission, the light, is sustained only by the divine oil, the Spirit.
And this oil flows through specific consecrated conduits, the two anointed ones. The vision affirmed to the exiles that their chosen leadership, Zerubbabel and Joshua, were not operating on human charisma or skill.
They were divinely appointed and backed by limitless, self-sustaining spiritual resources.
And this provided the definitive answer to that question that must have been haunting them. How will we ever finish this project? The how is not human, it is divine. They were assured that the hands that laid the foundation were guaranteed by God to finish the work, no matter how immense the mountain appeared in between.
And that confidence, drawn from this vision of a continuous, miraculous supply, was the precise antidote to that paralyzing fear of the day of small things. #tag outro, summary and final thought.
So we've taken the full deep dive into Zechariah chapter 4. We've moved from the prophet's human exhaustion all the way to the final identification of these divine conduits.
Let's summarize the key, the actionable takeaways for you, the learner.
First, the core mechanism of divine activity is established right there in verse 6. The source of power for any project initiated by God is exclusively the Spirit, not by might nor by power.
Second, any obstacle opposing God's work, no matter how big that great mountain, it's destined to be flattened into a plain before the divinely appointed worker.
And finally, the successful completion of the work rests on those dual pillars of consecrated leadership, Joshua the priest and Zerubbabel the governor, who are guaranteed an abundant, never-ending supply of the golden oil, the Spirit.
They are the instruments, but the infinite resource is the power behind them.
The ultimate, timeless lesson of Zechariah 4 is one of assurance. When we feel overwhelmed, underskilled, or lacking resources, this chapter guarantees that God provides a complete, abundant, and self-sustaining source of power for every single task he initiates.
And that assurance is most critical precisely when we're facing the pressure and the perceived inadequacy of the day of small things.
And that profound assurance leads us to our final thought for you to contemplate. We learn from our sources that the eyes of the Lord are running to and fro throughout the whole earth, assuring constant divine oversight and strength for those whose heart is sincere toward his purpose.
So if that divine providence is still active, still watching, and still guaranteeing success for spiritual tasks initiated by God, then we have to ask ourselves,
what contemporary great mountains might God be preparing to turn into a plain? Think about those institutional or global or even personal challenges where human might and power have just failed completely.
where is the Spirit preparing to ensure a seemingly impossible completion? The plummet is placed in the hand of the appointed worker, and the watchful eyes of the Lord guarantee the process.
That ancient promise of overwhelming divine resource against overwhelming human opposition is the legacy of Zechariah chapter 4.
Carry that assurance with you.